what's been interesting is not just the biding of time, but the how specific sectors and industries, China and US, get different treatment. So if you take semiconductors, right, the news flow around semiconductors in the last 48 hours has been very heavy, but the president's been willing to make ad hoc exceptions. Actually, our reporting across the technology sector more generally, and in things like raw materials, is that the message from diplomats and officials that fly around countries outside of China say don't do business with China right now. The question is how much of the quid pro quo is coming into it. So the quid pro quo that the president's extending to the US chip makers is give us a revenue share of anything you get out of China. In exchange, we'll let you do business there. But when they sit down with Chinese officials on the other side of the table, there's also the issue of whether China wants access to certain American technologies or not. We want the raw materials, and that's become abundantly clear in the last 24 hours, and whether or not it's a bargaining chip, pardon the pun.
And on that point, I mean, the latest headline on this is that China's telling firms not to buy the H20 chips as well, raising all sorts of questions about it. We've had both the official guidance, but also some social media posting associated with the central government there as well, with criticisms of the product itself, as well as encouraging them not to use it.
So specifics and chronology is really important here. What sourcing tells us is that these advisories, and they are guidance and advisories, they're not binding, went out in the last few weeks, particularly the month of July. It's completely normal for the Chinese government to instruct government entities and state-backed enterprise not to use foreign technology where there's a security concern. But it does specifically relate to H20. And the thing that you need to consider is not the rationale that this is in response to what we saw yesterday, a confirmation that the president will take a share of American company revenues as a tax, but actually an issue of domestic pride for them as well. Huawei on the accelerator side is making a lot of progress, infinitely beyond what the H20, the Nvidia chip, is capable of. And that's the story and has been since May. China's come full circle to a point where its technology companies, it wants them to use the national chip, not to use the H20. You saw US futures react quite severely, and that's because the other thing that's happened in parallel is there's been a massive scramble in the last couple of weeks to model for how much money Nvidia might get out of China. And there are people that think in the next fiscal quarter it could be, $7 billion, $8 billion. There's a lot of, I think, recalculating going on this morning.
Yeah. So what does it mean for the chip makers then?
So H20 is an AI accelerator based on the Hopper architecture. Until very recently, Hopper was Nvidia's cutting-edge chip. And it was specifically engineered for the Chinese market to conform with prior administration rules, export restrictions. It's completely performance-based. Nvidia at the start of the year wrote down all of the inventory they had of that chip as about $5 billion. They can't sell it. They haven't sold it. None have flowed from the United States to China so far. But China is the most important end market in the world for all sorts of things: consumer electronics, data centers, and increasingly AI. And Jensen Huang has been very consistent, actually just sort of banging the table over and over again that, look, China's doing basically half of the world's AI research. Don't you want us to be their technology provider of choice? Because if you don't, what's at stake is not just for Nvidia and lost revenue opportunity, but America, the lost opportunity that China just relies heavily on a domestic champion. So going back to the original story, from China's point of view, look at the reaction of their chip industry in this morning's session, or Asia session overnight. For them, it's great news to Nvidia's loss of opportunity.